In the next hour, inside the minds.
By the time I was 13 or 14, all the girls in my class were getting married, and they're getting married to people that are 30 or older.
The indoctrination.
Ladies, build up your husband by being submissive.
Of one of the most controversial religions in America, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS. What you hear may astonish you.
How old were you when you got married?
16.
How old were you when you became pregnant with your first child?
16.
Is there a point where religion crosses the line into mind control? On April 3rd, 2008, the state of Texas stormed the El Dorado compound of the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with armored tanks and guns drawn, and began removing children who live there.
They brought in machine guns, assisted with air power and snipers. They took positions around the ranch, and they took hundreds of little children.
Child Protective Services eventually separated more than 400 children from their families and from what the agency considered a potentially dangerous lifestyle.
This is about children who are at imminent risk of harm, children that we believe have been abused or neglected.
These little children have been terrorized.
The FLDS denied the allegations and insisted their religious freedom was being trampled by the state of Texas.
What the state is really saying is that they want to attack this whole lifestyle as abusive.
The group readily admits it encourages men to take multiple wives, but the question for Texas authorities doesn't seem to be about enforcing polygamy laws. At the heart of the controversy is the age of the brides. What's being alleged is that adult men are marrying and having sex with underage girls. Some said to be as young as 14 years old. Some said to be close relatives.
In the United States, we have an absolute right to believe anything you want. You cannot act on every religious belief that you have. And if one of them is statutory rape, marriage to an underage girl, or just general physical or sexual abuse, it's illegal.
The FLDS doesn't deny there may be incidents of abuse, like in all parts of society, but they deny that it's systematic.
By removing all of the children, by defining the household unit as the ranch rather than the family unit, I think that they've vastly overreached in terms of removing children from an environment. I also think that the basis upon which they moved in here and the way that it was done was completely inappropriate.
I think anytime you have a few thousand people in a community, somebody's going to do something bad like that. That is the nature of human beings. There will be some child abuse. There will be some domestic violence and other kinds of bad conduct. That doesn't make it representative of the community. It makes it the kind of bad conduct that we need to police.
We were told that our children have been abused, and none of them have been abused.
Those children have been traumatized so much.
The case went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, where ultimately, with the support of the American Civil Liberties Union, the FLDS triumphed. Nearly 2 months after the raid, it was ruled that child welfare officials had no right to take those kids away, which means the children of the FLDS were allowed to go home. But to what? The women of the FLDS describe their community as heaven on earth, a place where they're promised eternal salvation. They say they're not abused housewives forced into loveless marriages as teenagers. What they cherish more than anything, they say, is their children.
We love our children, and they love us. How could they love us if we abused them?
But some who have either been kicked out or chose to leave the religion tell a starkly different story. One that goes beyond the polygamy, they say, into a lifestyle defined by abuse and an intense program of mental indoctrination. It's possible that both sides are telling the truth, that they simply view the same set of circumstances differently, that one person's strict religious upbringing is another person's brainwashing. So where is the line between religion and mind control? An attorney representing the FLDS declined our request for an interview for this story. We did speak to several former members of the group.
Growing up in the FLDS, we were not to be noticed. We were not to make ourselves attractive. We were not to be anything but submissive, subservient, and make babies, and raise them right so they stayed in the religion.
Rena Mackert was born and raised in an FLDS family. She says her father had 4 wives and 27 children. As a teenager, she says she was assigned by the group's spiritual leadership to marry one of her stepbrothers. They had 3 children, divorced, and she was then assigned to marry a man 30 years her senior. When she refused, she says she was excommunicated and forced to leave her children behind.
My family was told I was dead, to never speak my name. I was not their sister. My mother looked me in the eye and told me it would have been better for her if I'd never been born.
It is very, very difficult for a polygamist woman to leave the organization. They put boys out because they want to reduce the male population to enable them to have more wives assigned to each man.
Rena fought hard to get her children back. 11 months later, she succeeded. Neither she nor her children ever returned to the FLDS. But for women like Rena, leaving means more than physically getting away. They say it means breaking the powerful mental grip of mind control to which they've been subjected.
The women that leave the FLDS are labeled as apostates, traitors. They have turned against God. They will be condemned on earth and in heaven. They will be separated in eternal darkness alone.
The threat of damnation is a potent weapon, but it wasn't enough to keep Flora Jessup inside.
My life was chaos and fear and pain. And I got to a point when I lived within the FLDS where I didn't only hate myself, I hated my dad, I hated my mom. At the same time, I loved them. I wanted to be safe, but you never do get safe. The pain just never stops.
Flora was raised in an FLDS home. Growing up, she desperately wanted to run away, but she says her family had other ideas.
They walled off the end of a hallway in my uncle's home where I spent 3 years in solitary confinement with them trying to beat Satan out of me. One of the things my aunt used to love to do was beat the bottoms of my feet with a cane. If you couldn't walk, you couldn't run. If you couldn't run, you couldn't escape.
By the age of 16, she'd had enough.
I ran for my life. I was married at 16 and stayed in the marriage for 3 weeks, and then I ran. And I hitchhiked back and forth across the United States for 5 years.
Flora stopped running when she got pregnant with her daughter. She still carried the baggage of the FLDS, and eventually she decided to fight back against the group by freeing other young women who believed they were trapped there. So far, Flora says she has rescued more than 80 women and children. 2 of them were Fawn Broadbent and Fawn Holm. In 2004, KTVK senior reporter Mike Watkiss was there to record the rescue for his documentary Colorado City and the Underground Railroad.
Anti-polygamy activist Flora Jessup heading for a rendezvous with 2 teenage girls.
Let's go get my kids.
A couple of 16-year-olds who have run away from their families in Colorado City and now say they don't want to go back.
I don't want to become some 50-year-old man's wife or something like that.
The 2 girls, best friends who share the same first name, Fawn Holm and Fawn Broadbent, on the run and hiding out at a safe house on the outskirts of Laverton, Utah. And it's here in the middle of the night the 2 teenagers place their fates in the hands of a woman they've never met, hoping for a future outside of Colorado City and away from the practice of polygamy.
You can't talk to boys. It's like really wicked. You can't do anything. Can't watch movies or TV or anything. You can't dress like you want to.
We've always been told that people out here were wicked, and I don't believe everyone is wicked.
Shall I tell you a secret? Something that I found out when I left. It's true, we're all wicked. But we're not as wicked as them.
I do believe that it's terrorism hiding behind the skirt of religion. I also believe that it's a criminal organization, and it is founded on the exploitation and abuse of children.
The FLDS has thousands of members. Only a handful of former members seem to speak out against the church on a regular basis. Are their stories representative of a larger problem within the FLDS? Or, as in the rest of society, are there bound to be some cases of abuse? Up next, plural marriage means many wives with a mission to procreate.
They have an abundance of ovulation test kits that they get in bulk, and the women are to find out when they're fertile.
There was many officers and SWAT team around and buses.
Child Protective Services eventually separated more than 400 children from their families and from what the agency considered a potentially dangerous lifestyle.
This is about children who are at imminent risk of harm, children that we believe have been abused or neglected.
These little children have been terrorized.
The FLD. In the next hour, inside the mines.
By the time I was 13 or 14, all the girls in my class were getting married, and they're getting married to people that are 30 or older.
The indoctrination.
Ladies, build up your husband by being submissive.
Of one of the most controversial religions in America, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus, FLDS, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with armored tanks and guns drawn, and began removing children who live there.
They brought in machine guns, assisted with air power and snipers. They took positions around the ranch, and they took hundreds of little children.
On April 3rd, 2008, the state of Texas stormed the El Dorado compound of the Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS. What you hear may astonish you.
How old were you when you got married?
16.
How old were you when you became pregnant with your first child?
16.
Is there a point where religion crosses the line into mind control?